everybody. Welcome back to the Sound Fears podcast. I'm your host, Phil Bevers. It's a good day today. We've got a great guest. Very excited for this episode. Been talking about it, been thinking about it. Today I have my dad, Dr. Walter Bevers. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you.
Amazing.
I am humbled and privileged to be here.
So this is your first podcast ever, right? Being on a first on
This
a podcast?
is correct.
Okay.
Yes.
How does it feel? Do you feel like a fancy guest?
Well, I feel like the hair on my legs is standing up, but
I'm
I'm sure
okay.
I'll get past that.
Yeah. You just gotta let it flow. It's just a regular conversation. And if it's bad, we can delete it. That's the best part. I play God here. I get to do whatever. If we don't like it, it's gone. You know what I mean?
Good.
So, I'm very excited to have you on the show today. Have a couple topics. You are visiting me in New York right now.
I am.
Just to hang out. We went to American Museum of Natural History. Went to the planetarium. I pulled a little bit. If you watch Always Sunny and you know about the Cool Mac or Mac's cousin episode, you'll know that they went to the planetarium high and it was wild. I can confirm. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Now, usually I was expecting to hear Neil deGrasse Tyson talk because he's the one who I've always, associated astronomy, almost said astrology, and that is not the same.
No.
Astrophysics and like astronomy things and different space stuff. I feel like everyone looks at Neil deGrasse Tyson as kind of like the person. Well, now that Stephen Hawking is gone, and
yes,
kind of everyone goes to Tyson. So, but it was Lupita Nyong'o who was doing the voiceover, and she just has a phenomenal voice.
She does.
It's really nice. Like it was very soothing, and she just like, obviously an actress, but like, not all actresses have great just like speaking voices. I'll be honest, like Jack Nicholson, I don't like his speak. He's very grating on the ears, but
Yes.
but that's part of the character that he brings to those parts and those roles.
Well, there's a lot of actors out there, especially the younger actors, who do not have voiceover abilities.
Mm-hmm.
And so they base their profession on those physical looks,
Mm-hmm.
the visual effects that they bring to the screen.
Mhm.
And you don't get people. I mean, one of the few, I think, like a Mike Myers has a great voiceover. Eddie Murphy. There's several folks that are able to do voiceovers, and you can picture them in your mind, but if you see them on a screen in another character, it's easier for
Mhm.
you to understand and get what they're saying.
Yeah, and it's also like it's an ability to emote through just the voice and not have to be physical.
Yes.
And like, have to rely on my facial expressions for you to know how I'm feeling. And maybe I keep my voice one way and then like I'm kind of showing you what's going on. Christian Bale is like that a lot, I've learned.
Yes.
In a lot of his parts, especially like Psycho, American Psycho, in the Batman movies.
Mhm.
He's like but also, I mean, Batman is also not egregiously expressive or anything like that. Pretty known for like being the mysterious, kind of dark, kind of brooding dickhead.
Right. Well, but Christian Bale can also bring about different characters using his voice. And, he can bring the gravel to it and be a completely different type of person.
Well, yeah, and especially you go from movies like The Machinist versus like Cheney. Or
Yes.
Dick or whatever Vice. Vice is what it's called.
Yeah.
Imagine they just called it Dick in all caps like they do with Vice. Dick. Oh, okay. I can't wait to see that Christian Bale movie. I wonder what that's about.
Yeah. Yeah. It's unfortunate that particular movie had a little too much reality to it, but
I don't think they made it real. I feel like they didn't emphasize. I mean, I also didn't watch it all the way through. Did you watch it all the way through?
I did.
Do they emphasize how evil of a person Dick Cheney is? And like how devious the Afghan war and like entire, just like money profit it was, like the whole thing?
I don't think that was the writer's intent to make that character as evil or as dishonest, I think, as people perceive the vice president at that time.
Hmm.
But, for someone who had spent the last, 8 years head of Halliburton and making just a bunch of money
Hmm.
off of defense contractors and things like that. And all of a sudden, uh, President Bush or President elect Bush is trying to look for a vice presidential candidate, or George Bush, who was governor at the time,
Hmm.
getting the nomination and then trying to find a vice presidential candidate. And he puts Dick Cheney in charge of finding a candidate. And everybody Dick Cheney brought to him, Bush didn't like. And so, finally he says, why don't you take it?
Hmm.
Well, Mr. President, our governor, I don't want to do that.
So wait. So what was the reason that he put Cheney in charge of that
Well,
responsibility?
Cheney had a very deep background in Republican Party politics.
Hmm.
He had been on the Nixon staff during the Nixon presidency and also served under President Ford.
Oh wow, he's deep.
Yes,
Okay, I never
yes.
realized he was even back with
He went
Ford.
back down. He was not
Man,
a
he must have been
Rockefeller
way
Republican.
older than I thought by the time he was vice president. He was like Joe Biden's age, I guess.
Yeah, he
Is he
was in
like
his he was in his mid-60s at that
so
point.
he started early then?
Well, he had also served in Congress after serving on Nixon's staff and
Mhm.
Ford's staff. He served in Congress as a congressman from Wyoming, which his daughter Liz Cheney took that seat.
Ah.
Up until this last election,
Mhm.
she held that Cheney seat, as they call it in Wyoming.
Cheney seat.
But
That's hilarious.
Dick Cheney, had a background and then forayed his government service into the private sector.
Mhm.
And as George Bush had become governor of Texas and elected a couple of times and decided to run for office, Dick Cheney had the political savvy of the National Republican Party.
Mhm.
And so Bush, because George H.W. Bush,
Mhm.
Papa, or 41 rather, um, didn't want to use his levers in the Republican Party.
Mhm.
Uh, George W. Bush wanted to be his own man. So he went out and sought Dick Cheney's advice to help him through the late primary season into the convention, and then to help him look for a vice presidential candidate up until the convention started.
Wow. I see. I didn't know all of that, so that's very interesting.
Well, you learn a little bit when you teach history for a living.
Yeah,
So,
I believe it. I believe it, especially when it's like Texas politics. You know what I mean?
yeah, a little
Because
bit of a
you
background.
also worked in the Texas House of Legislators for a
I,
while.
I did. I worked for two different state representatives
Mhm.
during my time in college, and then I worked a third legislative session with the Texas Student Lobby.
Nice. Did you hold any kind of administrative or executive positions when you were there, or
I
you were
was
kind of
just legislative aide to both state reps, and both of them were very independent gentlemen, leaning toward the conservative side of things.
Mhm.
Um, and both of them were not ones that were going to go out and write a bunch of legislation and try and pass.
Mhm.
They mostly wanted to go and serve, do the committee work, look at bills, trying to improve, understand process, and understand those bills that were going to come to the floor to vote on.
Mhm.
And so it was my task to keep up with local legislation, constituent information,
Mhm.
and desires, and then translate that into how they looked at different pieces of legislation, how they voted. I sat many, many committee
Mhm.
meetings, uh, bored to death, because there were bills that we weren't interested in, but my boss was at another committee meeting and somebody had to cover this. And
Ugh.
it was,
So some busy work here and there.
there were busy work here and there, but learning the process of the Texas legislature was just an incredible tool.
Is it similar to other state legislators, or is Texas very different? Because Texas is a very different state than other states, even among the southern states. We
Yeah.
are considered we're considered like our own thing in Texas.
Well, we
Also
are,
because of, the origins of the country, of the state is being a country and a
having been
nation,
the
and then
only
being
right.
annexed in by force, basically. Because America was like, we sent you out there, you're bringing it back. And Sam Houston was like, well, I don't want to. Stephen F.
Yeah,
Austin was like, well, I don't want to. And then they were like putting a gun to the head and being like, you're gonna.
yeah, yeah, and it helped too that there were people like Maribel B. Lamar, who
Hmm.
was first governor of Texas,
Hmm.
who really wanted Texas to be a state because after gaining independence from Mexico, there were still concerns that the Mexicans were going to come back
Hmm.
and try and take Texas again.
Yeah, even though they, killed Santa Anna, didn't they? In San Jacinto? Oh no, they sent him back, right? Like humiliated?
Correct.
Yeah. But I always remember the story I heard in history class when I was like in like 7th or 8th grade, talking about San Jacinto and the capture of him, where after, they basically, for people who don't know, the Alamo happened, big loss, big moral defeat, a lot of people died, big people died. This is where Bowie died. That
Everyone
was where,
died.
yeah, it was
All
where,
300.
yeah. And so the US Army was basically like, nah, we're not going to just take that on the chin. So they basically followed them to San Jacinto and ambushed them at like 2 or 3 in the morning.
Well, the story of the Battle of San Jacinto is interesting because Santa Anna's army was camped along the banks of what is now the city of Houston,
Hmm.
and the Texas Independence Army. Those folks had fought them all the way from San Antonio eastward, and if you don't know the geography of Texas, that was about 250-mile venture from San Antonio
Over
to
to that east side of
over
Houston,
to the east
basically.
side of Houston. And they were the Independence Army wanted to surprise Santa Anna. So what they did was they hired a local girl to go and entertain Santa Anna
Hmm.
in his tent during the evening.
Oh, wow.
That's the story of the Yellow Rose of Texas. That was her name.
Oh, I've always heard that. I never knew that that's where that was
Yes.
from. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. Well, Santa Anna was a real dickhead. He was like known for being pompous and like he never actually showed face on the battlefield and shit. Like
No,
he's a real
he
baby.
had the power and he
Yeah.
didn't need to go out and fight. He could stay in the back and direct folks, but he was a military wizard.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he definitely knew how to surround the Alamo correctly and like do all the. I mean, they held off for how many years was the Texas Revolution? Like,
Well, we fought for a couple of years,
yeah,
and really about a little over a year and a half, I think,
of like
from
real.
the Alamo up until the defeat at San
Mhm.
Jacinto.
But I always heard, and so I, spread this story like wildfire because I think it's hilarious that Santa Anna, when they finally did the ambush and they basically like caught them by surprise and were just like killing people and taking prisoners, that Santa Anna disguised himself as a soldier,
Yes,
and one of these soldiers gave him away because they whispered El Presidente at him.
yes.
And then they were like, "Oh, that's you!
Yeah.
Oh, bro, we
Come with
know you.
us.
Come on,
Welcome to Texas.
get over here." And they basically just like beat his ass and then sent him back to Mexico. Did they kill all of his men and send him alone?
No, they sent prisoners back to Mexico.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you don't need to kill those guys. They're just soldiers.
They were there, they were trying to protect Mexican interests.
I was gonna say, and also like I'm sure they weren't exactly happy. I mean, we did invade out of nowhere, kind of for no reason.
Well, that was important territory at the time.
Okay, the manifest destiny. That's right.
You
That's
have
right,
to look
that's
at
right.
economic interest.
If you're gonna
Did you pay attention in economics in
No,
high
I
school?
didn't. That's
Okay.
why I'm in film.
Okay.
That's why I took this job. No, yeah, I mean, but you could say that like obviously any kind of colonization is not necessarily good, but I can't fix this.
It's
I can't do anything about that. The only thing we can do now is try and fix relations and try and help people in the way that we can.
Well, it's all about the relationships
Yeah.
and what you build, whether it's on a personal level or if you're looking at relationships within a city.
Mhm.
I think the current mayor of New York wanted to build different relationships with several communities across this area.
Hmm.
And he did because I think former Mayor de Blasio had
Hmm.
strained some relationships at the time. And, um, new era, new
Yeah.
mayor. And
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, Eric Adams has strained his relationships with a lot of the citizens of New York, though, because of the bullshit that they've started to. I mean, being a former cop, he did talk about police presence and wanting to up police presence because he
Mhm,
thought that the crime wave was getting out of hand.
right.
Um, and so, I mean, like even in my area in Bushwick, you see cops of like 4 to 8 with assault rifles, the full utility, like Batman belt kind of thing, like dog, canine unit, like
Well,
and to be honest, my area of Bushwick is pretty gentrified at this point.
but they also know what a powerful force you are in the community, and they
Oh,
want to
me
make sure.
specifically?
Yeah, that's it.
They're camping out by the Bevers residence. They know I'm a revolutionary. I'm the next Che Guevara.
Oh, well,
They know this.
you have the bandanas to prove it. So,
Yeah, I just got to get the stupid ass fold over green beret thing.
and we can look for one while I'm here.
That's
So,
true. Yeah, I'm sure that we could find some kind of surplus store and get one. I could really Che out here.
that's it.
That's speaking of Che. You know this that in my 8th grade year, I was in a church choir that went to Cuba. We were invited by I don't know what family, but I know is a very influential family
Yes.
to go. Did they ever confirm that it was like them?
It was a mission trip set up through the
Like the.
Methodist Church
Mhm.
uh, there in Havana.
But we never did any mission work. We just went and sang for rich people at
Yeah.
a restaurant one time.
Yeah.
And then we sang in a church for rich people. And I'm pretty sure it was the Castro family who was there. But I can't confirm. I do know that we had a tour guide who had a 9mm gun on him at all times. So I'm sure that wasn't a regular
Again, they knew of your presence.
yeah. This is fucking 8th grade revolutionaries coming through. He's got insane ideas. But that was one of the, a lot of people, we weren't allowed to bring things back, even like clothing or anything.
Correct.
Because at the time, when I was in 8th grade, that's what, 2010 or 11, something like that?
That would have been
2011
between Christmas and New Year's of 2011.
and 12.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because in 2012, I was a freshman. And we weren't allowed to bring anything back. So all of us tried to smuggle as much as we possibly could. Some people brought back cigars, which was one of the most illegal things, like most prohibited things that they asked us not to try and bring back.
Yep.
Some dads did, a couple of kids did for their dads who weren't allowed to go on the trip.
And I'm still
Um,
waiting for my Cuban cigars. by
Look,
the way.
I was not as rebellious and daring and bold back then as I am now, or even was in high school. I was still terrified.
Okay.
I was still scared in 8th grade to do something like that because the implications of being like not just international crime, right?
Right.
We're in Cuba, of all places. As an American, it wouldn't be a great look for me to try and bring shit back. And I don't think anyone got caught, but I ended up bringing back a Che Guevara hat.
Yeah.
Which I kept for a long time. I think I used to wear it so much it like tore, where like the straps in the back where you like connect it and tighten and stuff.
Mhm.
It tore there, and I think I still have it in my stuff. I definitely would not have thrown it away just because it's such a crazy thing. But it's like in parts of Russia, in parts of Spain, in parts of major parts of Italy, a lot of parts of Italy. Those people out there, like even though you're not supposed to really idolize the villains or criminals or whatever of whatever the government at the time is telling you, they still do. Like people in Italy love Mussolini still because he was great to most Italians. I mean, kind of.
Well, I mean, he was
They-
he was a powerful voice for the people at the
Mhm.
time.
And the people in Cuba still talked about being grateful for what Che did, and Castro, Fidel, when he was still a revolutionary before he went Gaddafi on them. Which is often what happens, I find. Once oil money gets involved, coming from international sources, they get pretty fascist pretty quick. Because
Well-
Gaddafi was like gonna be good for them. He wasn't communist, but he was like socialist or something, and he really wanted to emphasize Libya's right to like their minerals and any kind of exports they had. They didn't want foreign powers coming in and taking it and being like, well, this is ours, you made a deal. It's more of like, no, we'll refine it, we'll do everything, and then you can buy it from us as a finished product, not as wholesale raw material. And America was like, no, 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 buddy. You're going to give us crude oil or
Yeah.
something like that.
Well, yeah, and I go back to, and you've heard me say it a number of times, Lord Acton said, power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So when folks get a little taste of power, they love to increase that power.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, especially in countries that are struggling at the time, those relationships with the common man.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you want to go back and you're very well versed in the history of Adolf Hitler,
Mm-hmm.
and how it was his view of the common man getting them jobs back, you know, trying to ingratiate himself
Mm-hmm.
and his political thought process to the common people. Mussolini did the same thing in Italy. Castro did the same thing,
Well,
kind of
it's
by
so easy
force
to
in Cuba.
convince the common man when there is the government or outside forces from that are happening to the country cause them to be super poor. I mean, specifically in like the Hitler's case,
Mhm.
the Weimar Republic post World War One, Germany fucked up. They were on the wrong side, and the League of Nations was crippling them because they had to
Right.
pay back everyone's war debt on top of their own, on top of trying to not have a collapsing economy, which is what it became. I mean, it was one of those things of like in the peak, or I guess the deepest valley of the Great Depression, where you would, by the time you got from your house to the supermarket, the price of bread had like doubled.
Right.
And it's like, well, of course, you're going to be able to get people riled up and be like, it's the government's fault. Fuck them. Not, maybe we all backed the wrong horse on that Great War. like,
And you never know
but it's all,
because of how
war's
history turns
perspective
out.
and stuff.
Right.
So they thought that they were doing the right thing. Everyone who goes into war thinks that they're doing the right. Well, granted, the government may know that it's the wrong idea, but the people who fight and are inspired by them and by these leaders think that they're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Like in Vietnam, for example.
Uh,
There's proof that came out, and there's people who talked who said, no, we knew going into it this was a bad idea and that it wasn't going to go well.
Well, the United States knew the French once the French pulled out of Vietnam,
Mm-hmm.
that there was a possibility that the Chinese would want influence in Asia. Well, that's their next door neighbor,
Mm-hmm.
and to try and placate some of the fears in Vietnam of a Chinese takeover, then America sent advisors and trainers and then soldiers to try and help shore up Vietnam, and that didn't help because we really didn't fight to win.
No.
We fought to keep China from winning,
Mhm.
and it's
Trying to
hard.
placate.
Well, yeah, it's hard to play defense. You know, you can't have an offense if all you're doing is playing defense. So,
Well, especially when the country's not on your side. The Viet Cong were ruthless in the way that they
oh,
fought. It was
absolutely.
guerrilla warfare in a way that had never been seen before because it's knowledge of the land, not even just knowledge, mastery of the land and like expertise of knowing how the terrain and the trees work and all this stuff. Then you've got time to prepare because they've got to bring all these soldiers over. So you've got all
Mhm.
this time to set up all those traps that were well known throughout the Vietnam War from the Viet Cong, like the pit with spikes covered in shit and blood. So even if you didn't get, even if you got out, you didn't die, you're still going to get an infection and die from it, or so,
Right.
there's so many different things. And then you start having, because soldiers are angry, the army's angry, the US is angry, they're starting to lose a lot of people. They're like, all right, let's up the cruelty. So now you're going in and clearing out villages with flamethrowers and Agent Orange
Well,
and
because the United
disfiguring people.
right. But in the U.S., you also have to understand the U.S. could not tell the friendly locals from
The Viet
the
Cong.
the Viet Cong,
Hmm.
and so you end up with issues of going in and destroying villages. I
Hmm.
mean, the My Lai massacre was,
Hmm.
it was told to the American people that that's what happened. We thought this was a Viet Cong village. Well, no, it was the power of a sergeant leading his platoon into a village, and they were pissed off.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they just kill everyone and
Right.
everything in their way. And because there's a desperation when you are like, you literally don't know where in the trees they are, and the whole place, like Kowloon City, is like covered in trees and these buildings that are super complex and like small narrow pathways, and you've got all this shit going on and you have no idea what's happening. You just know your friends who you have now spent months, years, whatever with, are being killed like that, like with like by shadows almost.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're desperate. Not saying it's, justifies stuff like those massacres and
Hmm.
torching a village, but it's like, at the time you're basically broken mentally because you're the you know I don't exactly know them, but I know people who are service members now, and they're like, basic training is to break you down
And build
and then
you up
build you up
into a
as this
soldier.
into this mold of a soldier.
Right.
And if that's the case, then so now you've been mentally broken once, and not but the way you've been trained is not working. Everything you've been told would work in a certain way is not going that way because they're not fighting in the same rules as the way we were,
Right.
which is, I'm not saying we should have expected it, but it's like, how did America win against the British? You didn't sit in a formation and walk across roads like on highways like a car basically.
Yeah.
You came out of the trees and you just hacked at people with hatchets, like man-made hatchets and shit.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and you wonder, you talk about, breaking down soldiers and then rebuilding them. You wonder then why we were not equipped as Americans and even as medical experts
mhm,
to be able to deal with soldiers that came home with mental instability
mhm.
and depression issues and PTSD. Yeah, we still haven't figured out what's the best method for dealing with soldiers like that, and I've seen it firsthand. I've had good friends whose sons weren't in war, but were on warships,
Mhm.
and were you know glazed over with rocket fire or shot at from the shoreline and came back with PTSD just from regular duty in the
Yeah,
Navy,
not even.
not even in a wartime atmosphere, and they come back and struggle with PTSD, and we haven't gotten to a point where we can figure out how to best deal with soldiers and folks that come back with mental illness.
Well, yeah, and the VA is not exactly being nice to them. Like you see
Well,
so many soldiers who like, got addicted to drugs while they're over there. Especially Vietnam was terrible about that.
oh, they
They sent
smoked weed all
heroin,
the
they
time.
smoked weed, they gave
Yeah,
them meth pills so they could stay up for, nights on end to be able to, stay alert during duty. But you see that kind of stuff. I mean, most people who know about World War II know about just the pure meth tablets that Nazis were given that was on purpose so it would fuck them up and they would be crazy and just be vicious and like, completely incompassionate or whatever. Uncompassionate?
probably uncompassionate, but a lot of the drug use by American soldiers, especially in Vietnam, was because they didn't want to be there
Yeah,
and they were
I get
forced to be
that.
there. They were drafted.
Yeah.
I mean, just think, visualize, put yourself in their shoes. If you graduate from high school on a Saturday morning and Monday morning you're shipped out to basic training because you're drafted to go, you have no choice.
Yeah.
There were a number of American men that fled the country to avoid being drafted and became enemies
Of the state,
of the
basically.
state because they were not allowed to come back to the United States. They knew if they came back to the US, they would be arrested for avoiding military service.
Draft dodging, yeah.
Yeah, and so now we have
Well, how come
countries.
how come Donald Trump wasn't? Hmm.
Now there were some deferments allowed.
For certain price points, I'm sure.
Well, for certain things, if you were in college and keeping a B average, which we know the former president
Did
did
not.
not have a B
Did
average,
not.
in whichever institution of higher education he
Mhm.
attended. Um, and then there were some medical reasons that you could get deferments. That was the route he took. with foot
I was gonna say
ailments.
like foot spurs or something like that, right?
Yeah, something along those lines.
Yeah.
And those were questioned. So,
Well, and also if you were gay, if you just said you were gay, they're like, nah, we're good.
well, yeah, because that was a morale issue with the military, and I think that's been proven not to be the case. But uh, you know, it goes back to, if you're not like me,
Mm-hmm.
then you must be my enemy. And that's the thought process of society today. And you and
Mm-hmm.
I have talked about this
Yeah.
ad nauseum. And the way politics works today, I'm right and you're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
whether I have facts on my side or
Yeah.
not.
Well, and everyone thinks that they're an expert now, or at least like I read a couple articles. I know what I'm talking about.
Well, yeah.
And
They
it's
stay at
like,
a Holiday Inn
yeah,
Express last night.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Like that is a huge problem right now of people having opinions when there's no authority to have opinions. There's no base of fact or proof or evidence to have certain opinions. There's no experiential justification of having of having an authority to speak on an opinion, and so especially when it's things like science and like medical things.
Well, just fact in general.
Yeah.
People have lost grasp of facts and believing facts. I go back to having grown up and watching the evening news,
Mm-hmm.
which was the way you gathered national news from 5:30 to 6 o'clock, right before the local news at
Mm-hmm.
6.
Yeah.
And you had people like Walter Cronkite, Harry Reisner, not Tom Brokaw, but David Brinkley,
Mm-hmm.
Chet Huntley, who read the news. There was no opinion injected. Here are the facts.
This is what happened. This is the
You
record.
make your decisions about how you feel about it. And because of the invention of the 24-hour news cycle,
Mm-hmm.
and in 1980, when the 24-hour news cycle became a business, when Ted Turner created CNN, they had to put news on all the time,
Mm-hmm.
and that wasn't profitable. So what did they do? Then they started to create shows of opinions.
Mm-hmm. Talking heads, pundits.
Talking heads, exactly. I mean, the most famous one on CNN that became a hit was Crossfire.
Oh yeah, I remember Crossfire.
And that had someone from the left and someone from the right with a guest, and they would debate. I mean, they would spend 30 minutes arguing over each other.
Next on Crossfire.
Yeah. And that led to the rise of Pat Buchanan.
Yeah, that's
who
who I was.
reinvented.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And Pat Buchanan, of course, had been in the Nixon administration,
Mm-hmm.
had been in the Ford administration, as a very, very young and innocent politico,
Mm-hmm.
and then became, made his name in politics through the media.
Mm-hmm.
And just because he knew better than anyone else, again, he played fast a time or two with the facts. But that led to what we see today on television with 20 different news channels, and it's according to your preference of politics.
Mm-hmm.
And there might be 3 different channels on the left that will spew whatever you want to hear from the left. Then you have those on the right who will spew whatever you want to hear from the right. And if you don't listen to both sides, how can you formulate an opinion based on fact?
Mm-hmm.
And I think we've seen it here in the last couple of weeks with a particular newsman on Fox who was given availability to security tapes from January 6th. And
Talking about Carlson or Hannity?
Mr. Carlson.
Well, what's really going on? Is America being bled dry by minorities and refugees? You tell me.
Yeah. Well, but he cut through. There were 41,000 hours of tape that he had to view, and
like body cam footage, CCTV,
all CCTV footage from the Capitol that day, all cameras And what did he do? He spent 2 days, 2 hours of his show showing tape of nonviolent people that had intruded into the Capitol, but they were not being violent. They were just tourists. They were very peaceful. And we all know, we've all seen, we saw it live
Mhm.
as it was happening on January the 6th. That was not, yeah,
What was happening?
yeah, no.
No.
And
There was
so,
I mean, there was a police officer who was basically beaten to death or,
well,
like,
sure,
just trampled. There was the woman who was shot because they shattered the glass trying to get into the Senate room,
I into the House
into the
floor.
House
Yeah.
floor, and it
And now
what do you
she's a
think is
martyr
gonna
for that
happen?
cause. Yeah.
My whole thing was like, what you had to have assumed some people are going to die. It's this crazy thing of I'm so, like so tired of hearing the peaceful protests, to be honest, because peaceful protesting only works if the other side wants peace. And when they
Correct.
don't, and then they want to strip away rights, whether it's from voting or it's some kind of like, body autonomy or even just like expressing yourself and who you are,
Mhm.
there is no I'm not saying you should go out and just murder conservatives. That's not what I'm saying. You find the source of the problem, which comes directly from Washington D.C. There's people writing legislation, it's people introducing and defending this legislation that ends up being passed because them, their little buddies are all hanging out in these back rooms where no one knows what's actually being traded away. And they just are, I just am tired. Like the game of politics on the federal level to me when you're basically making transactions with lives at stake
Yeah.
is gross to me. And that's why, I have talked about it many times with this podcast. Anyone who knows me, I'm viciously anti-politician. I
Right.
hate them. I don't want to hear from them. I don't even want to try and talk with them because whatever they say, I just don't.
Well, our politics has gotten to a point now, it's not true government service, it's true self-service.
Mhm.
And both sides are guilty. I mean, don't think that I'm going from one side to another or bashing whatever. We're passing what used to be a budget process with 13 appropriations bills that were, debated in committee. They were marked up in committee, passed by committee. All 13 bills passed by each house, by the House and by the Senate, and then sent to the president. We now do one reconciliation bill, one,
Mhm.
and it's 2,000, 2,500 pages, and it's given to voting representatives, 5 hours before they're told to vote on there's no debate. There's no review of, what's the policy here? Why are we trying to do this? Why are we trying to do that? Well, we add more money to this and we add more money to this. And
Mhm.
and because I believe that this particular uh, organization within government shouldn't exist, I'm going to zero out their budget.
Mhm.
Well, that's if you want to get rid of an agency, you have to shut it down. You have to shift those responsibilities somewhere. And the body politic today is that, I'm in charge. I'm going to do things my way. And if you can beat me and take control, then you get to do what you want.
While also we try to sabotage you at every possible step.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, it's really fucking annoying to watch, honestly. But I have one more thing that I wanna bring up.
Okay.
Um, and you are older than me, right?
I sure
You have
hope
some
so.
you have some life experience, more life experience than I do, and I think a lot of people my age find it despairing, trying to exist and trying to find, not even just necessarily find. I mean, yeah, finding happiness, which is part of those God-given, nature-given rights that many philosophers and even like people like Adam Scott, the
Mhm.
founder of American democracy or whatever, talk about life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. I think a lot of people my age find it very difficult to enjoy nature and life in its most secular level, as people like Nietzsche and Diogenes of just being like, this is life. you have to take it as what it is
Right.
and find happiness in it. They talk about that. I think it's hard sometimes to justify optimism over pragmatism with how the state of the world is in the way that we have been raised and have become accustomed to it, which has kind of just been like um, from our perspective, boomers just kind of like shit on the world, set it on fire. And then they were like, you guys just like are so lazy. Like, why aren't you doing stuff? And it's like, why the fuck would I? I've been told by climate scientists I have till 2050. So like I'm gonna hang out with my friends and try and live because apparently at 2050 everything sets on fire. Now that
Yeah.
being said, I did read something the other day about the ozone layer is apparently repairing itself, which is cool. But I wanted to ask you, with your life experience, how do you try to find a way to enjoy life as it is without feeling like you had to flip everything over and create like I'm sure you see that we're pretty nigh on a revolution here, whether it's a digital or whatever it is.
Right.
People will rise up against these forces. We're with the unionizing and everything that's going on against the monopolies and trusts of Amazon, Tesla, these banks like Silicon Valley Bank, more like Silicon badly stank, by the way.
Yeah.
But how do you see everything that's going on and I mean, how do you try to stay okay with being alive, I guess?
Wow. That setup has kind of led me. Wow. I need to write a book about this
I
thing,
know.
don't I?
It's a thing I've been thinking about. It's
Wow.
difficult.
Well, so I'll be 61 next month.
Mhm.
So I've seen my share of different things. Growing up, and I grew up in Galveston, Texas. Um,
Mhm.
I lived through the desegregation of public schools.
Mhm.
First grade was at an all white school. Second grade, I went to my neighborhood school.
Mhm.
My neighborhood was a very mixed race neighborhood. And therefore, I was raised not to see people by color. Um, I mean, we all played together. We all went to each other's houses. You and I talked yesterday about the boat people coming in from Vietnam right at the end of the Vietnam conflict, and people coming into Texas and how they were treated, especially in Galveston, because the Vietnamese came in and became shrimpers. Well,
Mhm.
that really pissed off the shrimping community. And so they became very active in trying to be anti Vietnamese, which was something we had seen being anti Black, anti Latino. I mean, anti whatever is
Anyone
not
who's not
me.
a white American. Yeah.
Exactly. And so coming in at the tail end of being boomers, um, and boomers, I think, came out of their raising of by their parents coming out of World War II, that we're going to make the world better for our children, and we did. But we also got to a point where we were. You've heard me rail on this before. Okay, you're playing little league baseball, and even the last place team is going to get a trophy because you were on the team.
Mhm.
We didn't cut anybody.
Yeah.
Everybody got to play. Well, there's a certain understanding to that, but there's no development of competition, of trying to improve yourself, a reason to improve yourself to make your mark.
Mhm.
So my generation grows up, we go through all of that. Then we see that generation of parents who, as they grew older, like your body starts to fall apart. Well, they're going to develop this medication and that medication. And as the boomers got old enough to be at a point where um, they were not able to function in a physical sense in their relationships, well, here's a new drug. Here's Viagra. Here's
Yeah.
all this. And
It's all been
now,
benefiting boomers.
absolutely. And now that that generation is starting to tail off, then my generation's coming along and we're going, oh shit, we've been brought up, we've got to make money, we've got to plan for retirement, we've raised our kids hopefully the best way we can. But it was my generation that was the first to have two working parents
Mhm.
because that was the only way you could afford things.
Mhm.
And so we had to raise our children differently.
Mhm.
And as my generation has gotten older,
Yeah.
we've seen our children raised, and you've been through. I mean, you were born 4 years
Before 9/11.
before 9/11.
But I mean, 4 years, I only know life after 9/11.
Yeah, I mean, because there's no memories there. So you grow up knowing that that America has an X marked on it,
Mhm.
and that there's people that hate us,
Yeah.
and then we've got to make ourselves safe.
Yeah.
So how do you make yourself safe? Well, you start to segregate part of society because we certainly don't want those people that tried to kill us living with us. Well, if they're American citizens, they're American citizens.
Mhm.
But we've segregated again that way. And then we continue to have these different skirmishes. We go into Afghanistan, we go into Iraq, at Dick Cheney and his group. Well, there's weapons of mass destruction in Iraq.
That were never
They
found.
they were never there. That was their reason to go in and take out a leader, a dictator. Now,
Saddam Hussein was a pretty bad
he
guy.
was a pretty bad guy, but we had no reason other than we thought the people that perpetrated 9/11 came from Iraq. Well, they really didn't. They came from our friends in Saudi
Saudi
Arabia.
Arabia, yeah.
Uh, and there's just time after time we've pointed that out, and you've talked about it on two or three different occasions. You have to get to a point where you go, I've got to be happy.
Mhm.
I have to handle the things I can handle, and what I can't change, I don't try and change.
Mhm.
Because if I try and change everything, I'll never be successful. I will never feel that I've made a difference. And therefore, I'm never going to be happy. Because if I don't get this done, I can't be happy. Well, that doesn't work anymore. And there are so many people out there who really work at, I've got to make myself happy. I'm depressed. I mean, you did a thing talking about depression on an earlier episode.
Mhm.
Um, there's medication for this, there's medication for that. Well, damn it, why don't you just take time and figure out what makes you happy,
Mhm.
and then do it.
Yeah.
And is it a change in career? Is it a change in lifestyle? Is it a change in where you live or how you live or what you do? You've got to make yourself happy. I'm guilty of it myself. I put 30 years in public education. I was happy for most of that. Now, toward the end, not so much. But retiring from public education and having networked with people all along the way, I have an old friend who calls me up. Hey, I'm dean at Houston Baptist University, and I've got this class in the master's program. Will you come teach this one class? Okay, I'll do that one. And that one class turned into two more, and then it turns into a full time job.
Well, now you're the dean of.
I'm not dean. No,
No, okay.
no,
Well, you're
no,
the
no.
head of the department
I,
for
I
for doctorate.
I'm director of residential doctoral programs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the head of the doctoral program.
Yeah. Okay. If you want to say that, but I'm back in the classroom, which I
Mhm.
enjoy,
Mhm.
and I'm working with people who want to make a difference in education and in how things are, and that makes me happy. But also, what makes me happy is I'm not punching a clock. I'm not at the office 60 hours a week. I can take spring break and come up here and spend time and enjoy myself. and still get some work done when I need to get work done.
Mhm.
So you have to figure out at what point do you stop taking the crap and you've got to make yourself happy
Mhm.
because you're not promised tomorrow. You've seen that all of your life.
Yeah.
And if you're not happy today, what makes you think you're going to be happy tomorrow?
Mhm. Until you just say, I just have to do
You
this.
just have to do that.
So there's concessions along the way to like, you know, this could lead me down this path towards success, but I know I'm not going to be happy doing this.
Yeah.
I think that's really hard when you hear, like I heard all my life, you can do whatever you want to do. Any dream you have, go for it. You can do whatever you want to do. You're good at what, and it's like, well, you can't do whatever you want to do all the time.
Yeah.
You can do what you're good at really well. You can do things that you're not as good at, not that well.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know. It's
You're given a set of skills. You
Mhm.
know, it's God given talent, in my opinion. And you have to figure out what those skills are.
Mhm.
You have to figure out what you're really good at.
Mhm.
I've got good bullshit.
You're a good
I,
bullshitter.
I'm
I've
good
seen
at
it.
that.
I've seen it.
But I can talk to people and I can relate to people. And being able to talk them into helping themselves be better.
Mhm.
I'm good at that. You just have to figure out. Your grandmother, my mother, would always say, "Don't put up with the bullshit.
Mhm.
Just stop and make yourself. What will make you happy today? If it's a second cup of yogurt, wonderful. If it is a frozen margarita at the end of the day, go for it. Now, it doesn't mean you have to have 4 or 5 or 6 of those,
Mhm.
but make yourself happy. And sometimes you just have to open those pathways to try and figure it out.
Yeah. Well said. I like that. Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, not that you haven't heard that lecture ad nauseum.
Yeah, but I've heard it a lot, but other people, I think, need to hear that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's all about relationships too.
Yeah.
It really is. How do you build a relationship? Who you're in relationship with.
Mm-hmm.
If you're always hanging around people who are not making good decisions, how do you expect to make good decisions yourself?
Yeah. No, 100%, because it's all you know. You are your environment that you surround yourself with. I've
Yeah.
always been a big proponent of that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for talking with me today. I appreciate it, Dad.
Hey, not a problem. That I appreciate the fact that you have found an avenue to uh, share your wisdom with, even at the age that you're at.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you say how old you are on the
I'm
air.
25.
Okay. But at that age, you have an infinite set of wisdom and you share it in a very different way. And you share it in a medium, like we talked about last night, to where you can put those iPods in your ear and be doing something else and listening to this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully it'll make you stop and go, "Oh shit. Wow, that was profound."
Mm-hmm.
Or they may say, "Oh, wow, that was profane." I mean, I don't know.
That's gonna be my new slogan: profane. Profane.
That's it.
What that?
Your choice.
Yeah, your choice. You decide how you want to decipher that. Well, like I said, thanks for coming on, Dad. I love you.
I appreciate it. I love you too, son. You're awesome.
Thanks, man.
Fist bump, and you can't see that on the air.
Yeah, you can't, but just know that there was one. But thanks for listening to this episode, guys. I hope you got some work done. And if you didn't, then I hope you enjoyed listening to all the different things that we talked about. I had a little bit of history, had a little bit of politics, and had a little bit of life advice. So if you have anything else, any comments, concerns, anything you want me to talk about, you can DM me at Mophead Records, MOPHEAD Records on Instagram. Feel free to reach out to me, or you can email me, phil@bay1entertainment.com. But thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys on the next one. Bye.